welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book A Superior Man, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Clemente Soares stepped out of his house on Rua da Misericordia after a long, sleepless night. He had no destination in mind. The city streets were still quiet, and the early morning air felt cold against his skin. It was about 4 o'clock. The gaslight men were just starting to turn off the street lamps. The sky was beginning to show the first signs of daylight, but it was still dark enough to make the city feel gloomy and lonely. Clemente walked slowly, deep in thought. Now and then, he would bump into a market woman heading to the square with a basket or tray balanced on her head. A black worker usually followed behind, carrying another basket and a small tent for the stall. Each time, Clemente would briefly come back to reality, startled by the encounter, but soon he would fall again into his own thoughts. As the sky got lighter, bar doors began to open, trying to compete with the street vendors who had been selling coffee all night long. At the same time, workers from the shipyards started to walk through the streets, their heavy wooden shoes making loud noises on the pavement. Many of them stopped at the bars to warm themselves up with a drink. Newspaper boys were finishing their rounds, delivering papers with that perfect memory I've always envied in those workers. Taverns opened their doors and placed their signs outside to show what they had to offer. Soon, the sun was fully up. The city came alive. More and more people filled the streets. Shops of all kinds opened for business. It was a new day. But Clemente didn't notice any of it. He kept walking without direction until, finally tired, he reached Santa Lucia Beach. There, he stood and looked out at the sea. Under different circumstances, Clemente would have stopped to enjoy the view. He loved the way the morning light touched the water, the way the city slowly woke up around him. But today, his eyes were fixed not on the ocean, but inside himself. Everything around him seemed unimportant. One big thought filled his mind completely. Clemente Soares sat alone in his small room, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts were heavy, but not new. This one had been around for centuries, maybe since the beginning of time. It wouldn't disappear until the end of the world. It wasn't pretty. It was ugly, disturbing, terrifying. It could drive the purest soul insane and turn a genius into a fool. And it wasn't confusing. It was clear, undeniable, and simple. It needed no explanation. Clemente Soares had no money. I don't need to explain how important money is. I love my readers too much to make them read a long speech about it. And for many of you, it wouldn't even be necessary. Most people, at least once in their lives, have understood what it means to have no money. If a girl sees her boyfriend distracted, or a man sees his friend walk past without taking off his hat, before jumping to conclusions, they should ask themselves, is he broke? That was exactly Clemente's problem. He had no money, and no hope of getting any soon. Even though he was clever and resourceful, nothing seemed to work out. Still, his situation wasn't so bad that he couldn't eat. He reached into the pocket of his vest with 2 fingers, like someone taking a pinch of snuff, and pulled out 2 ferry boat tickets. That was enough for lunch at Carceler's. He walked down Rua da Misericordia and stopped at home to check his drawers for a forgotten cigar. Luckily, he found 2 cigarettes. He lit one and headed out for lunch. 2 hours later, he was back home, full and relaxed from the meal and the smoke. He took a book from Balzac off an old shelf and got ready to wait for dinner. But where would dinner come from? Dinner didn't worry Clemente much. He usually got it from his friend's office, a place where he never went for lunch so no one would think he couldn't afford it. Clemente didn't feel the same way about dinner. His friend had once told him it would be a real favor if you came over for dinner every day. But he never said the same about lunch. That's why Clemente never showed up for lunch. He was proud. And need and pride can coexist, believe it or not. A poor soul cursed with both by nature and luck must be the saddest creature alive. His apartment didn't look as poor as his wallet suggested. You could tell it was once home to better days, modest ones, sure, but better. It was the home of a young single man, decorated with some taste, back when Clemente had a decent salary. Some things were missing, but not the essentials, just the extras. He had sold a few books, a couple of vases, a small statue, a cigar case, and some other small items that weren't really missed. If you saw Clemente stretched out on the sofa, wearing a robe, reading a book bound in Paris, you might think he was a rich student who skipped class and now had time to kill before getting a letter from his girlfriend. Girlfriend! Clemente actually did have one not long ago, at least. But that chapter was closed. She was charming, like one of the Graces, but in Clemente's eyes she had turned as ugly as one of the Furies the moment he found out her father had only about 5 government bonds. Clemente wasn't so shallow that 5 bonds alone could change his mind. Besides, he had never been serious about marriage with her. It had been more like a bet with some friends. He exchanged a few love letters with the girl, and then ended things quickly and gracefully. Carlotina, for her part, wasn't the kind to fall apart. When she realized Clemente was gone for good, she punched the air twice and started dating another guy who had been hanging around her house. The friend who had invited Clemente to dinner was a man named Lemos. He lived near the Largo do Machado and had a good job in the ministry. Clemente visited him often, not just for the food but also for the company. Lemos was talkative, funny, and generous. He liked to help people, even if they didn't ask. Clemente, though proud, accepted the help. He told himself it was only temporary. But weeks turned into months, and Clemente kept going back for dinner, never once mentioning lunch. He told himself it was a matter of courtesy. Lemos had offered, and refusing would be rude. But deep down, Clemente knew the truth. He had no money. His savings were gone. The job market was tough, and no one seemed to want a man like him, well educated, yes, but without connections or luck. Still, he held on to his pride. He dressed well, even when he had little to eat. He read good books, even when he couldn't afford meat. And he never asked for anything. Not outright. He let others offer. And when they did, he acted as if he were doing them a favor by accepting. Clemente never had another love after that day or anything close to it. From then on, he stopped chasing adventures. And how could he, anyway? He was out of work, broke, with big dreams but no way to reach them. The thought of chasing anything else never even crossed his mind. It was almost 3 in the afternoon when he got a short note from his friend Castriotto. They often had dinner together, and this message felt urgent. It read, "Clement, don't miss coming today. We have something to talk about. Yours, Castriotto." The request was unnecessary. Clemente would come even without it, but the promise of something important made him rush over right away. Castriotto was a respected fabric merchant, the kind of man who knew how to treat people well. He greeted Clemente warmly, with a few jokes that showed their close friendship, and led him to the back of the shop. There, he made an offer. "Medeiros needs a bookkeeper," Castriotto said. "Would you be interested?" It felt like sunlight cutting through dark clouds for poor Clement. Still, he remembered that gratitude often works better with a little coolness. So he answered with a calm, almost indifferent tone. "I wouldn't mind going," he said. "Then what's the problem?" Castriotto asked. "You know, I've worked in places before that." "I know what you mean," Castriotto interrupted, smiling. "Let's talk money." "Exactly. How about 3,600 rei?" Clemente's heart jumped, but he stayed calm. He asked one more question. "Will food be included?" "And a place to live if you want it," Castriotto replied. "That works. Thank you." This time, Clemente Soares shook his friend's hands with real joy, and Castriotto was clearly happy to help someone he truly liked. "I had something else in mind," Clemente said after a pause, "but it wasn't stable, and definitely not as good as what you're offering." "Then go tomorrow," Castriotto suggested. "Or better yet, let's go together after dinner." And that's exactly what they did. Right after the meal, Castriotto took Clemente to Medeiros' house. The man welcomed him like an old friend, clearly pleased with the new bookkeeper. The next day, Clemente Soares officially started his new job. It was only natural that Clemente Soares should rise fast. In just 2 short chapters, we've seen him go from a poor young man with nothing to a well-dressed office worker, earning 3 contos and 600 mil rei a year. You can't move much faster than that. But why did I go all the way back to the start showing him struggling, when I could have simply introduced him already hired and settled? Maybe I wanted you to see the kindness of Mr. Castriotto, the merchant who gave Clemente his first chance. And now, knowing that, you'll understand better why Clemente, after just 2 months, forgot to take off his hat in greeting when he passed his old benefactor on the street. Why? Because Mr. Castriotto, kind as he was, had the bad luck to go bankrupt. Worse yet, some people began to whisper that he might have cheated his way into ruin. That hurt him deeply. But Castriotto is a thoughtful man, and at 40 years old he knew better than to expect much from human gratitude. As for Clemente, he had his job now and he did it well. He was always on time, always ready, and always polite. His boss, Mr. Medeiros, noticed. Soon, Clemente didn't even need to stick to a fixed schedule. He came when he liked, and other small comforts came his way, all given by the boss himself. Back then, offices weren't as strict as before. The old rules that kept clerks from dressing well or living with some style were gone. So Clemente dressed sharply, walked tall, and lived as a man who belonged. After a year, Medeiros raised his salary to 4 contos and 600 mil rei, hoping to tie him closer to the business. Clemente quickly became a favorite. He was smart, well-read, and knew how to talk to people. He could solve problems that even Medeiros couldn't understand. It didn't take long for him to become a key part of the company, someone whose work made a real difference. At the same time, Clemente began to leave behind the people he used to know friends, from the days when lunch wasn't always certain, and dinner was often in doubt. He didn't need them anymore. Clemente Soares believed in a simple rule: never tip your hat to a poor man. No matter the situation, unless you crossed paths in a quiet alley, and even then, keep it brief and cold, to avoid any false sense of closeness. Clemente wanted more from life. He knew he had to move up, and when Medeiros invited him to a dinner hosted for a foreign diplomat, Clemente didn't hesitate. The diplomat liked the bookkeeper, and 8 days later, Clemente paid him a visit. Through these small steps and clever moves, Clemente began to slip into the world he had always dreamed of. Soon, his mailbox filled with invitations to dinners and dances. It's important to say that, by this time, Clemente already had a role at Medeiros' company. Medeiros introduced him proudly as a partner. In this new life, there was only one thing missing: a beautiful, wealthy bride. He wasn't short of options, but this part wasn't as easy as the rest. The women he met were either too rich or too poor. Still, Clemente trusted his luck. He was willing to wait. Waiting, he believed, was the secret to everything. One afternoon, as he walked down Quitanda Street, he saw an old man step out of a carriage. Moments later, a beautiful young woman followed. Clemente recognized her right away. It was Carlotinha. She was dressed like someone with money, and the old man had that lucric, powerful miles away from trouble. Was he her husband? Her uncle? A guardian? Clemente couldn't tell. But he could tell the man came from money. As he watched Carlotinha, all these thoughts ran through his head. She looked stunning. The pair walked into a shop Clemente knew well. He followed them inside, hoping she might recognize him. She did. She saw her old flame, but her face didn't change. Not even a flicker. She bought what she came for and got back into the carriage with the old man. Clemente thought about hailing a cab, about chasing after them, but he changed his mind. He turned and walked the other way. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about the lovely girl he had once loved. Clemente Soares sat at his desk, staring out the window as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room. His mind wandered back to the woman he had seen days earlier, her delicate hands, the way she held herself with quiet confidence. Now he wondered, was the old man her husband? Had she married into wealth? Or maybe he was a wealthy godfather, planning to leave everything to her in his will. These thoughts raced through Clemente's head like a wild horse with no rider. He turned them over and over, unable to let go. But eventually, sleep took him, and by morning the questions had faded like mist in the sun. 2 days later, as Clemente sorted through a stack of invoices in the office, the bell above the door chimed. He looked up, surprised to see the same old man from his thoughts standing there, adjusting his hat. Clemente stood quickly, smoothing his jacket. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" The man smiled slightly, and limped forward with the aid of a cane. His name was Comendador Brito, a well-known landowner from the hills above the city. He was in his 60s and walked with a slow, painful gait caused by a long-standing rheumatic pain in his left leg. Comendador Brito was a client of Medeiros Company, the trading firm where Clemente worked. Though he didn't visit often, each time he came in, Clemente made it his mission to treat the man with the utmost care. He offered him a chair, fetched water, and always made sure the Comendador was comfortable. He listened patiently to the man's long stories about his lands and his health. Clemente even memorized small details like the brand of cigars the Comendador preferred and made sure one was always ready when the man visited. Over time, Comendador Brito began to warm to Clemente. On more than one occasion, he praised him directly to Medeiros, the owner of the firm. "That young man," the Comendador said one day, "has a rare kind of kindness. He's thoughtful and sharp. You're lucky to have him." Medeiros nodded proudly. "Yes, he's one of the best I've ever hired. Discreet, clever, always ready to help. A true gem." One afternoon, as Comendador Brito finished his business and prepared to leave, he absent-mindedly left behind a small gold snuff box on Clemente's desk. Clemente noticed it the moment the man turned to walk out the door. He hesitated for a moment, then decided not to call out. He would return it the next time the Comendador visited. This wasn't the first time the old man had forgotten something. The day before, he had left his handkerchief behind, and Clemente had gone out of his way to bring it back to him at the foot of the office stairs. Everyone who knew Comendador Brito joked that he was one of the most forgetful men alive. Even he would laugh and say, "The only thing I never forget is my nose because it's stuck to my face." Later that evening, during dinner, Clemente mentioned the snuff box to his boss. "The Comendador left his snuff box here," Clemente said casually. "Did he?" Medeiros replied. "Well, we should send it back to him. Jose, come here." Clemente frowned slightly and said, "But sending something so valuable with a slave, I don't think it's wise." Medeiros shrugged him. "Jose is loyal. He can be trusted." Clemente crossed his arms, thoughtful. "Maybe. But even the most honest man can be tempted when opportunity knocks." Clemente sore smiled and shook his head. "Don't believe that," he said. "I'll send it right away." He paused for a moment, then added, "Besides, the Comendador is a respectable man. It wouldn't be nice to send such a gift by a black messenger." "One of the clerks could go," someone suggested. "No, sir," Clemente replied. "I'll go myself." "Well, if you want to." "What's the harm?" Clemente laughed. "It's not like it's something from another world." "Then do as you see fit. In that case, take those papers with you too." So Clemente Soares, now informed of the commendator's address, got into a Tilbury and told the driver to head there. The Comendador Brito had come to spend a few months in the capital. He had rented a beautiful house and gave his wife, because Carlotina was indeed his wife, the task of arranging and choosing the furniture. She handled it with great skill. This young woman hadn't been born among silk curtains or raised within the walls of a rich household, but she had a natural sense of beauty and a sharp eye for detail. With those qualities, she adapted easily to the new world she had entered. It was 6 o'clock in the evening when Clemente Soares arrived at the commendator's house. He was welcomed warmly, with clear signs of friendship. "I bet Medeiros put you through all this trouble," said Comendador Brito with a smile, "just to bring me some papers." "I do have those papers," Clemente replied. "But that's not the main reason for my visit. I've come to return your snuff box, which Your Excellency forgot at João Pedro de Veiga's house." As he spoke, he pulled the box from his pocket. The Comendador took it with excitement and gratitude. "I could swear I left it at João Pedro's place, where I went to buy some tickets for the hillside trip," he said. "Thank you very much for your kindness. But why did you come yourself? Why go through all this trouble?" "If it were trouble," Clemente answered, "and it certainly isn't, the honor of being received by Your Excellency would be more than enough reward." The Comendador, like every person under the sun, enjoyed hearing kind words. And Clemente Soares knew exactly how to say them in a way that pleased the ear. Clemente spent that very night at the commander's house, and left only after promising to return. He left with a good impression of the commander. But the same could not be said for Carlotina, who seemed unusually cold toward him. Clemente tried his best to charm her, showing nothing but attention and respect. He pretended they had never met before, even though he secretly remembered a stolen kiss he once gave her, long ago, between two windows during their brief courtship. But Clemente Soares was not the kind of man to embarrass anyone, especially not a young woman who might still bring him happiness. So he stayed within the lines of proper behavior, firmly believing that persistence could break any barrier. And he was right. Persistence won. Within a month, the commander's wife no longer acted distant. She began to show clear signs of affection toward him. Clemente thought he had been forgiven. He doubled his efforts, becoming her devoted companion. The commander adored him. Clemente was the joy of the household. Carlotina looked more beautiful than ever. In the past, she hadn't had the means to fully highlight her natural charm. But now that money was no problem, she focused almost entirely on showing off her graceful figure. Her dark skin, her black eyes, her high forehead, her lips like Venus, and hands so delicate they seemed magical. And all the other things lovers and poets usually say in such situations, those too seemed to apply to her. Was Clemente in love with her? No. He simply saw the commander's poor health and knew the man wouldn't live much longer. If he was going to take a chance on some new and uncertain business, wouldn't it be smarter to keep going with the one he had already started years ago? He didn't understand why Carlotina had chosen such a husband. As far as he could tell, the man's only real quality was his great wealth. But Clemente guessed that she must be deeply vain. And to win her favor, he said, and did everything he could to feed that vanity. One day he dared to mention the past. "Do you remember," he asked, "the Mangueira Street?" Carlotina frowned, turned her head, and walked out of the room. Clemente was stunned. Half an hour later, he had returned to his usual lazy self. But now he was more determined than ever to understand the girl's heart. Still, he thought it wise to wait a while and try different ways of getting closer. One afternoon, they walked together in the garden, while the commander argued with Medeiros under a mango tree about business matters. "Do you remember what you told me the other day about Rua das Mangueiras?" Carlotina suddenly asked. Clemente shivered. There was a pause. "Let's not talk about it," he said, shaking his head. Let's leave the past behind. It's dead now. She didn't answer. They kept walking in silence until they were far enough from the commander. Then Clemente broke the silence. "Why did you forget me so quickly?" he asked. Carlotina lifted her head, surprised. Then she smiled, but it was a cold, sarcastic smile. "Why did I forget you?" she repeated. "Yes. Wasn't it you who forgot me?" "Oh no. I stepped back because of something impossible. I was unhappy back then. I didn't have the money to marry you, so I chose to suffer instead." He paused. "Suffer? Yes, suffer. You'll never know what I went through in the first months after we were apart. God knows how many tears of blood I cried in silence. But it was necessary. And look, it was fate's doing, because now you're happy." The girl sat down on a bench. "Happy?" she said. "Am I? Don't you think so?" Carlotina shook her head. "Then why did you marry?" she started, but stopped herself. "Go on," she said. "Oh no. Forgive me." They were interrupted by Medeiros, who came over with the commander and said loudly, "I hate to interrupt, madam, but I need my bookkeeper." "And am at your service," Clemente replied, smiling, though he felt a little upset. The next day, whenever Carlotina saw Clemente, she blushed slightly. It was a great sign for someone preparing to become a widow again. When he felt the moment was right, Clemente Soares sent the girl a passionate letter. She didn't reply, but she didn't get angry either. Meanwhile, the commander finished some business in the city and had to return to his farm. This was a blow to the young man's plans. Could he still hold on to the hope his good fortune had brought him? He decided to fight hard. The girl, who seemed to have some affection for him, didn't resist much and admitted that her old feelings were coming back. She added that she wouldn't forget him. Clemente Soares was one of the best actors who ever avoided the stage. He pretended to cry, let out a few dramatic sighs, and said goodbye to Carlotina, as if he were deeply in love with her. As for the commander, who was by far the most sincere of the three, he truly regretted leaving behind a gentleman like Clemente Soares. He offered his help and insisted that Clemente must visit him at the farm someday. Clemente thanked him and promised he would. Unluckily for Medeiros, things didn't go well for him. 2 or 3 business disasters brought him close to ruin. Clemente did everything he could to save the company that held his future. But nothing could fight against a fate already decided, a word people use to describe other human foolishness, or the chain of events beyond our control. Soon, Clemente found himself without a job or money. Castriotto understood the young man's difficult situation when Clemente greeted him during that time. Precisely because Castriotto himself, having been seen as a victim of bad luck, had received support and help to restart his business. At his lowest point, Clemente received a letter from the commander, inviting him to spend some time at the farm. Having heard about Medeiros' misfortunes, the commander naturally wanted to help the young man. Clemente didn't wait for a second invitation. Clemente Soares wasted no time and sent a letter right away, saying he would leave in a month. True to his word, exactly 1 month later, he began his journey to the town of, where the estate of Commander Brito stood. The commander waited eagerly for him. And no less anxious was the young lady, though I can't say if it was because she already had feelings for him, or simply because he offered a pleasant distraction from her dull country life. When he arrived, Clemente was warmly welcomed as a friend. He quickly became a cheerful and entertaining guest, repaying the hospitality with ease. No one could do it better than him. With his natural sharpness, he figured out in just a few days how the commander saw life on the farm, and he made sure to flatter him in every possible way. But then, 10 days after Clemente's arrival, something terrible happened. Commander Brito fell seriously ill, and the doctor gave the family little hope. That's when everyone saw how much Clemente truly cared. He became the commander's devoted nurse, doing everything he could to ease his suffering. He stayed awake through the nights, traveled to nearby towns whenever something important needed to be done, and comforted the sick man with hopeful words or cheerful conversation to keep his mind off the gloom. "Oh," said the poor old man one day, "what a shame I didn't meet you sooner. I can see now that you are a true friend indeed." "Don't praise me, Commander," Clemente replied gently. "Don't praise me, because that would take away the sincerity of these duties, which come straight from my heart." Clemente's behavior deeply touched Carlotina. In this moment of shared worry, she showed herself to be a loving and grateful wife. At the same time, the small seed of affection that Clemente had planted in her heart began to grow once more. Carlotina was a light-hearted young woman, but the illness of her husband, the possibility of becoming a widow, and the tender care shown by Clemente all brought a deep change within her. And more than anything else, it was Clemente's kindness that moved her. During this difficult time, when she had so much to worry about, he never once spoke a word of love to her. It was impossible for the commander to escape death. The day before his final hour, he called the two of them to his bedside. His voice was weak and full of emotion as he spoke. "You, Carlota, for the love and respect you showed me throughout our married life, and you, Clemente, for the true loyalty of a friend that you have always given me, are the only two people in this world I will truly miss, and to whom I owe my deepest gratitude, in this life and the next." Clemente Soares let out a sob, interrupting the dying man's words. "Don't cry, my friend," the commander said gently. "At my age, death is not only unavoidable, it is also right." Carlota was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "Now then," the commander went on, "if you want to do me one last favor, listen to me." A flash of emotion passed through Clemente's eyes. He leaned closer to the bed. The commander closed his eyes for a moment. A long silence followed. Then, with his eyes open once more, he continued. "I have spoken again with my conscience and with God, and both agree with what I intend to do. You are both still young, and you deserve each other. If you love one another, will you promise to marry?" "Oh, please don't speak like that," Clemente said. "Why not?" the commander replied. "My feet are already in the grave. It's not wrong for me to say this. I want to leave behind me the people I owe the most happiness to." Those were his final words. The next morning, at 8 o'clock, he passed away. Some neighbors were still present in his final moments. His funeral took place the following day. That afternoon, Clemente Soares asked for a horse, said goodbye to the young widow, and rode toward the capital city. But he never actually reached the capital. Instead, he stayed near the farm. 8 days later, he returned to the house, claiming he had forgotten something. When Carlotina heard that the young man was back at the farm, she felt a moment of joy immediately followed by guilt, out of respect for her late husband's memory. Their conversation was brief, but it was long enough to make Clemente the happiest man alive. He looked at her with a quiet smile, the kind that hides more than it shows. She nodded, her voice steady despite the storm behind her eyes. "Go," she said. "I understand the depth of your soul in this moment of parting." Her words carried weight, but also a strange peace. "Promise me you'll come back in 6 months." "I swear it," he replied. And so, the Count had asked for exactly what both of them had hoped for. 6 months later, young Clemente Soares and the lovely widow were married. There was no need for a legal separation of assets. Clemente himself had suggested it, not because he truly wanted it, but because he was sure she would refuse. And she did. Clemente wasn't the kind of man who could be tied to a farm, content with the quiet life of a husband. 2 months after the wedding, he sold the estate and the slaves and moved to the capital. That's where the story of his life really began. No door was closed to him in the city. One of the first to visit him was the merchant Medeiros, who was going through a rough time. He even had the nerve to ask Clemente for a small loan. For a year, or maybe a little longer, Clemente made his wife happy. But it didn't last. Soon, Carlotina regretted the marriage. But it was too late. She heard whispers, rumors at first, then truths about her husband's affairs. She confronted him, hurt and angry, but Clemente only laughed it off. That only made her cry harder. He shrugged, as if none of it mattered. From that day on, sadness followed her like a shadow. After 3 years of marriage, she had grown thin and weak. By the 4th year, she was gone. Clemente gave her a grand funeral, one fit for a noblewoman. Even a few government ministers came to pay their respects. He wore black for a full year, as if mourning could erase what had happened. When the year ended, he said he needed a trip to clear his head, he claimed. When he returned, everything seemed the same. The same faces, the same smiles, the same respect. Some people whispered behind his back, saying he was ungrateful, that he had treated her badly. But Clemente Soares never cared what others said. And that's where the story ends. What? No lesson? No deeper meaning? That's the story. Not a full tale, not even a full sketch, it's just a line, a faint mark on the page of time. I'm not here to punish anyone, except maybe Carlotina, who already suffered enough for loving another man while her husband was still alive. As for Clemente Soares, he never faced any real punishment, and I won't make up on paper what life itself didn't hand out. Clemente Soares lived a celebrated and respected man, right up until the day he died of a stroke, surrounded by many tears. But those tears were no more sincere than he had been throughout his life. People admired him, invited him to dinners, listened to his opinions, and trusted his word. He played cards, danced at parties, and told jokes that everyone laughed at, even when they weren't that funny. Nobody ever brought up the past, not openly at least. Maybe some whispered behind closed doors, but in public, he remained the same charming, well-liked man he had always been. It's strange, isn't it, how the world keeps turning, no matter what someone may have done. Some lives end quietly, while others go on, untouched by the weight of their own mistakes. Clemente Soares was one of those who walked away cleaner, so it seemed. But perhaps the punishment came in silence, in the long, quiet moments when he was alone. Or maybe not. Maybe he never felt a thing. Maybe the world forgave him because he never asked for forgiveness. He simply went on living, and everyone else followed suit.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.